Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. Today we're going to be working a little bit on what I'm calling the Blue Streak Plaza. I don't know if that's actually its name, but that's what it's called in my notes. Got some buildings to build over here. Nothing too crazy, but as always, a couple builds that are going to take a few iterations for me to figure out something that looks pretty decent. We're starting over here with the red building right next to Blue Streak that used to house the Pirate Dark Ride. That was closed many decades ago. I never got to ride it, unfortunately. I think it later had an arcade in it, and now it is inaccessible to the public. They probably use it for storage and staff maintenance kinds of things. Of course, that's just a guess. I was pretty sad to see that in the Google Street View, you can still see some of the pirate theming on the building from 10-ish years ago when those photos were taken with the cannons out front. And that stuff has since been stripped out, which is a little sad. This building is pretty nondescript now, as I've been learning a little bit more about the history of some of the old rides here at Cedar Point. I have found out about some dark rides that the park used to have, and now there are none, which is kind of sad. It seems like Cedar Fair hates dark rides, and it's disappointing because there's some really good ones out there, and some of their parks could definitely use them. Anyway, next to the pirate building, we have Chickies and Pete's, another restaurant. This one has been here for a long time under a couple different names. I remember eating here way back in the day when it was the Game Day Grill and being a little bit disappointed with it, but I've heard good things about it nowadays. I didn't go when I was there this time, but I do quite like the remodeling they've done on the outside. It looks a little bit classier at least, so that's nice. It was also nice that I was able to go a little bit more detailed on this building. Since it's a restaurant, it's got some more nice looking decorations around the outside. And that was pretty fun to throw in here in my build. So this area is looking pretty snazzy now. I quite like how this building turned out. On the other hand, this area is probably going to be really bad for peep pathfinding, since getting back to this area to actually find these food stalls is going to be pretty tricky for peeps. Fortunately, at this point in the build, we don't really have a lot of guests complaining about hunger anymore. So I'm not super concerned about that at this time. And this part of the park isn't super densely populated. Most people are way back in Frontier Town trying to wait for the rides back there. And we do actually see a couple peeps walk into this area and buy some food from here. So either way, I think this is going to be just fine. One thing I am really disappointed about that you're going to be seeing a lot of throughout this park is going to be those green cabana umbrellas. It's really the only umbrella scenery that comes with non-custom scenery in RCT. It would have been really nice to have some colorable umbrellas. I know I've seen some people use mini golf holes for umbrellas, which sort of works, but they look a little bit too flat and kind of silly. So I don't think I'm going to be using any of those for umbrellas specifically for my build. I think we're just going to stick with the green cabana umbrellas. They do the job, even though they're not quite colored correctly, and everything is going to be green. Oh well. Anyway, continuing to flesh out this area, we've got another one of those 3-point challenge areas, the little basketball hoops that you can pay to try to make some 3-point shots and win some prizes. I was quite pleased with how the other one turned out behind the arcade with the little Virginia reel car for the basketball hoop, especially how easy it is to build these. They look a little bit under-decorated. I'm not really sure what else to throw in here to make them look a little bit nicer. The real ones have some like posters hung up and some more shelves and things for merch. So I might have to add some like mini golf track in here to kind of simulate that at some point. Haven't quite decided how that's going to work out. Next up, we're going to do some tweaking alongside the buildings that go along the main midway, since we're in the area. The street view photos from 2011 have failed me again. The building that is kind of underneath the Raptor 0G roll has been completely remodeled since those photos were taken. And instead of being a merch store, it's now a stall where you can get some fries and ice cream and drinks. And it looks a little bit more plain, but at least that makes it easier to build in RCT. Again, I'm a little bit bummed that it is positioned directly underneath the Raptor track instead of more in front of it, because my Raptor build is a little bit too close to the midway. But I don't think there's really a whole lot we can do about that at this point. I've got my roller coaster layouts pretty much set in stone at this point. And honestly, I don't think it looks too terrible under here. You get some nice little coaster interaction, so it's not the worst. While we are here, I decided to continue down the main midway to finish out the remaining restaurants and stalls in this area. We've got a brand new, or newly remodeled at least, building called the Corral. Another counter service restaurant, but one that actually looks quite nice in real life. It has a little bit of a weird shape with a like diagonally oriented corner on it that was a little bit of a challenge to build here, but I think what I wound up with looks actually really good. Quite happy with the way it turned out. At least from one angle, it looks pretty good. If you rotate the camera around behind it, you can see a little bit where the scenery is kind of clipping and not lined up correctly. Not sure if there's any good ways to tweak that, but even so, I kind of like it. As I've said before, making interesting looking buildings in RCT, a lot of it is just about the footprint and the shape of the building. And this one definitely has that. It's definitely a weirdly shaped building. But I quite like it. It definitely gives a lot of character to this area. A few more restaurants and shops in this area. We've got Derby Dogs, just another counter service stall. This one's a little bit cramped back here, so it was a little bit difficult to make a building that looked half decent with the space that we had. That's going to be a recurring theme going forward, I imagine. But taking advantage of some of these big chunky New York wall pieces for the roof, like we did in a couple other areas of the park, really helps put down some pretty decent looking scenery in a small space. So happy these pieces exist even if they're not particularly versatile. Every once in a while you can get some good use out of them. Couple more random buildings at the end of the midway here. I believe these are both the kinds of stalls where you can get like face tattoo, like temporary tattoos and caricatures done. So nothing for the peeps to do over here, but at least we can make some nice looking little buildings over here. We're kind of copying the barn structure that we used for the ice cream parlor further up the midway for this area, and I kind of liked how that turned out, so I decided to kind of just copy it over here. The caricature stall is kind of on the diagonal, so I opted for a very weird shape on this one. But again, since there's nothing for peeps to actually do over here, it didn't really matter a whole lot what it looked like. And actually, I think it turned out pretty good because there's a lot of space underneath it for the scenery to go. I'm using some little stools and archery targets for the easels, and I actually quite like the way it looks. Again, it only really looks good from one angle, but from that one angle, I'm pretty happy with it. Finally tried to clear up a little bit of scenery on the Cadillac Cars ride. This area was looking a little bit sad, and I need to give it a little bit more love here. There's definitely some more decoration that needs to go in this area. There are some cool little signs advertising some fake products. And you can see we're using a similar strategy here that we did over by the pirate building, using the playing card fence with some abstract walls in front of it to make a colored sign. I think the illusion works pretty well. While we're over here, I tried to replace the default car ride track with single rail to make it look a little bit nicer, a little bit less bulky. Unfortunately, the single rail coaster doesn't have the tiny turns that we require, so instead I opted for steel wild mouse, which I'm not a huge fan of. But we definitely need something besides the default car ride track because it just does not look good in the environment. It sticks out too much and just takes up too much space. So I'm debating whether I should stick with the steel wild mouse or maybe use the single rail and tweak the layout so it doesn't need the tiny turns. I got some options. I'm not totally sure what I want to do yet. But anyway, that about does it for the main midway. We're pretty much done with everything on the front of the park, aside from like the entrance plaza and the buildings by the entrance gate. We're almost to the point where you can zoom out really far and take a nice big screenshot without any unfinished areas, which is really awesome. So things are looking good, and I'm pretty pleased with how our midway is coming along. Still a lot to do closer to the back of the park, and of course we have all of the stuff outside the park to do as well, but we're making some great progress, and I'm really happy with the way things are going so far. But anyway, that's going to do it for today. And as always, if you've got any comments, questions, or suggestions, please let me know. Thanks for watching.